Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is what makes a terrorist attack successful? The attention it draws. As long as the target is well known enough to draw the attention of the world media, it does not matter how many or how few people are injured or killed. A public strike at the heart of the enemy is, for the terrorist, a win. In Paris, ISIS scored a big win, and al-Qaeda took a major hit. We live in a cocoon. Naturally, we assume that the big losses in the aftermath of Paris were felt by, in order, the French, the West, the rest of the free world. But there was another big loser. Al-Qaeda belongs on that list too. Al-Qaeda and ISIS share a common enemy, and Al-Qaeda cannot complacently sit back and watch ISIS strike victory after victory against that common enemy. Too much is at stake, like those recruits they are both mining and trolling the black web for, and like the allegiance of their own existing members who can, and often do, shift allegiances and switch affiliations. And money, of course. Big and small money is at stake. The more public you are in your attacks against the enemies of Islam, the easier it is to attract sponsors and raise money. And of course, honor. We can never let ourselves forget that among radical Islamic groups, like among warring mafia families, honor is a very important issue. Al-Qaeda was the first group to terrorize the West. They were the original radicals. That means that with the rise of ISIS, Al-Qaeda has the most to lose. Each swing of the pendulum towards ISIS is a swing away from Al-Qaeda. In order not to fall dramatically in the eyes of observers, donors, and the all-important recruits, Al-Qaeda had to quickly perpetrate a terror attack on the West. Their attack came 1 week after the ISIS attack on Paris. The date was Friday morning, November 20th. The venue was the Radisson Blu Hotel in Bamako, Mali. Al-Qaeda chose the Radisson Blu because it is the westernmost hotel. Actually, it is the most public hangout in the region for Westerners. The Radisson is also the most luxurious hotel in the region. According to the numbers, Al-Qaeda did everything right. The attack immediately murdered 19 people, plus the 2 terrorists. The number of dead then rose to 27. The terrorists drove right into the hotel compound. They threw grenades, they shot machine gun fire, they killed the security guards. They took 170 people hostage. The only problem with the Al-Qaeda attack is that Mali does not have the panache of Paris. As horrific as it was, in the end, Al-Qaeda did not receive the same PR that ISIS received. There are significant differences between ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and an analysis of the Paris and Mali attacks bring out some of those distinctions. They both want an Islamic caliphate that will rule the world, and they will both murder unspeakable numbers to achieve that goal. ISIS wants it right now. Al-Qaeda is willing to work a little more slowly to get there. But the biggest difference between ISIS and Al-Qaeda has to do with insiders and outsiders. ISIS divides the world into 2 groups. There are enemies and there are friends. Friends are very narrowly defined. Friends are people who agree with the principles and priorities of ISIS on every single level. There can be no differences and no divergence. No contrary opinions are permitted. In the world occupied by ISIS, to question the leadership, even in the closed circles, is to invite death. Critique transforms you into the enemy, and the verdict for all enemies is death. No questions asked. Al-Qaeda believes that Muslims, especially Sunni Muslims, should be spared. Al-Qaeda believes in cutting fellow Muslims some slack, in giving Muslims latitude. In Mali, for instance, Al-Qaeda spared and released anyone who could recite a verse of the Quran. They have shown the same sympathy on several occasions during other terrorist attacks. No such sympathy exists in ISIS. Christians, Jews, Muslims, they are all murdered. This behavior, too, we have seen time and time again. For example, the father of the Jordanian pilot who was burned alive in the cage begged for his son's life, Muslim to Muslim. The father invoked the Islamic fundamental principle that a Muslim does not kill another Muslim. It was to no avail. For ISIS, all who disagree are heretics and traitors, and the punishment for those crimes is death. The crime justifies the murder. ISIS and al-Qaeda are locked in a fierce competition. They are playing for the hearts and minds of millions of young people ripe for recruitment. They are playing for the pockets of millions of Muslims eager to fill their coffers. We in the West are their pawns. Terror is the tool of their trade. Let's talk about recruits. ISIS recruits. Scott Atran, the co-founder of the Center for the Resolution of Intractable Conflict at Oxford University, made public some very interesting information about the study of ISIS recruits. Atran says that 75% of all ISIS recruits are recruited by friends. He also said that 20% of ISIS recruits are recruited by family. That means siblings and cousins. He admitted that mosques have become radicalized, but ISIS recruitment very seldom comes from the mosques. Anecdotal evidence seems to confirm Atran's research and his assertions. We see many sects which include friends from the same neighborhoods. These are friendships that date back decades. When looking at those who perpetrate terror attacks, we see an uncanny number of siblings and cousins that are involved. This means that radicalized mosques are not the hotbed of the recruitment that we may have thought they were. At hardcore recruiters that we see are less effective than we gave them credit for. Contacts and connections are the most effective recruitment tools. This knowledge should allow us another set of methods to use in order to interrupt recruitment. Find friends, find siblings. I've also been thinking about the crumbling relationship between Russia and Turkey. A Turkish F-16 shot down a Russian Su-24. This is a very ominous set of events. Turkey is claiming that they warned the Russian pilot 10 times in 5 minutes to leave Turkish airspace. Russia has not let this action go unanswered. The atmosphere is very tense in the air and in and around Syria. 14, can you imagine, 14 air forces fly in the Syrian skies. 14. That fact alone is cause for worry. Mistakes are made all the time. These are the air forces: the United States, Britain, Canada, France, Australia, Russia, Israel, China, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, Bahrain, Turkey, and of course, Syria. All fly around in Syria. They are bound to bounce up against one another, and it's inevitable that some country at some time will fly out of bounds. But Russia and Turkey have been testing one another for over a decade. This is not the first skirmish between them, and that includes, by the way, planes. The first incident took place in 2012. A Turkish F-4 reconnaissance plane was shot down. Then a year and a half later, Turkey shot down a Syrian MiG and a helicopter. The Turks have repeatedly said that the Russians are violating their airspace. On October 3rd, it was reported that a MiG locked onto a Turkish jet. Russia is now expanding their plane arsenal in Syria. They are doubling their number of planes over the next few weeks. As I said, this was not the first, and it will certainly not be the last time there is an incident in the skies of Syria. And it is not the first and not the last time there will be an aerial conflict between Russia and Turkey. Coming up next, Points of View. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. Let's look at two columns today, one from the Washington Post and one syndicated column from the Washington Post Writers Group, which was also published in the Washington Post, although I read it in the Arkansas paper. First up is a column from the Washington Post, and it's entitled, "Is Syria the Beginning of the End of Putinism?" And it's written by Colbert I. King. The I stands for Isaiah. They call him Colby. That's his nickname. It was published on November 27th. He's a regular columnist in the Washington Post. Sometimes he writes about D.C., sometimes about politics. In 2003, Colby won the Pulitzer Prize for commentary. King joined the Post's editorial board in 1990 and served as deputy editorial page editor from 2000 to 2007. Here's how he begins the column. They all laughed when President Obama warned Russia about getting into the Syrian quagmire. They all laughed at Christopher Columbus when he said the world was round. They all laughed when Edison recorded sound. They all laughed at Wilbur and his brother when they said that man could fly. Well, check out Russian President Vladimir Putin in Syria. For oh, ho, ho, who's got the last laugh now? Apologies to George and Ira Gershwin. Now King moves on to discuss Putin and Syria, saying the following. Of course, what's happening to nuclear-armed Moscow is no laughing matter. Mired in an economic crisis at home, Russia is enmeshed in propping up a weak but vicious Middle East ally, Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria. And the Kremlin is straining to keep Assad in power and at a considerable and unexpected costs. Russians are going home in body bags. The next part of the column is a list of disasters and failures that have befallen Russia since their move into Syria. And then Colby explains that Russia is really suffering, and this may be the end of Putin and Russia itself. Quote, coffins highlight the cost of Putin's unilateral and reckless military intervention in the Middle East, where tensions are now at their highest. Meanwhile, the Russian news agency TASS reported that unlike previous economic crises, for the first time since the early 2000s, Russia is seeing a decline in real incomes. Government measures to support the economy of the population are not enough, Alexei Kudrin, former finance minister and chairman of the Committee of Civil Initiatives, told the Third All-Russian Civic Forum in Moscow. Colby continues, while Putin's eyes are on Syria, inflation is rising in Russia. The economy is shrinking, poverty is rising, growth has flatlined, and the ruble is taking a fall. Western sanctions are squeezing the Kremlin, and Russia's mother's milk, oil revenue, is taking a hit because of weak prices. At this point, King discusses Putin and Obama. He says, Obama is correct not to give in to Putin's desire to be regarded as more important than he is, or to give credence to Russia's imagined influence on the world stage. And Obama is also right to keep a cool head and to continue building an international coalition of heavy hitters to launch attacks on global terrorism. Colby, King is correct. Obama should not be threatened by Putin, and that is how he concludes. And he comes full circle with the metaphor of humor and laughter. Listen how he concludes. Granted, Putin's capacity to trouble the waters is huge, but Russia's ability to rival the United States as a world power and dominate events in the Middle East is not, though some Obama critics appear to wish it were so, if for no other reason than to disable the president. And that, too, is no laughing matter. The next column is by Charles Krauthammer. Krauthammer is one of the most important neoconservative columnists writing today. His style is crisp, and he is extremely insightful. Krauthammer is actually paralyzed and only has partial use of his hands. Charles is an MD, a doctor, and is a psychiatrist. He suffered the spinal accident diving into a swimming pool in his first year of Harvard Medical School. Charles Krauthammer has won the Pulitzer Prize for commentary and writes for the Washington Post. This column was published on Monday, November 30th, 2015, and it was published as part of the Washington Post Writers Group. The piece is entitled, Syrian Immigration Cul-de-sac. FYI, cul-de-sac means in French, dead end. Here's how Krauthammer begins. The Syrian refugee debate has become a national embarrassment. It begins with the president desperate to deflect attention from the collapse of his foreign policy, retreating to his one safe zone, ad hominem attacks on critics, this time for lack of compassion toward Syrian widows and orphans. This, without a glimmer of acknowledgement of his own responsibility for these unfortunate souls becoming widowed and orphaned, displaced and homeless? In the first place, 250,000 deaths ago, when Bashar Assad began making war on his own people, he unleashed his air force and helicopters. They dropped high explosives, nail-filled barrel bombs, and even chemical weapons on helpless civilians. President Obama lifted not a finger. The column in Krauthammer then goes on to explain that the policy of the White House will not work, and neither will the anti-immigrant policies of Trump and other GOP candidates, except for Kasich. Charles Krauthammer bemoans that no one has stood up to the silly solutions of the White House and of Trump. He concludes, other GOP candidates have issued Trumpian echoes. The Muslim registry had no takers, but some have advocated shutting out all refugees or taking Christians only. They're chasing the polls, showing strong anti-refugee sentiment. How deeply short-sighted. It may work in the GOP primaries, but Trump-like anti-immigrant, anti-foreigner, now anti-Muslim, anti-Arabic rhetoric, and don't forget those cunning Chinese stealing our jobs and ruthless Mexicans raping our women, will not play well in a general election. Politically, it will be fatal. John Kasich has forcefully denounced this slide into the swamp. Where are the others? Part of the greatness of Charles Krauthammer is that he's an equal opportunity critic. He is not an ideologue. He is a thoughtful neoconservative thinker, and as such, he must call a spade a spade. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. Normally, this segment is dedicated to cartoons. Sometimes I've brought cartoon alternatives, like Pictoons or pictures with captions. Today I've selected one cartoon and two pictures. The pictures are commentary. One is a picture taken in a demonstration in Jerusalem. The other is a picture caption published on the web. Both pictures deal with the BDS, or the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, which is attacking Israel and trying to get countries and companies and entertainers to boycott Israel and Israeli products, academics, and culture. In this first picture, a person is holding up a sign/poster. It reads, "We would boycott Palestinian goods, but they don't actually make anything." The picture was published on July 16th, 2015 in the Jewish press. Several of these signs have popped up over the past few months. They've made their way around the internet. The beauty of this sign is the humor. It takes the BDS movement and tries to turn the tables. Obviously, lovers of Israel want to defend her. There's no doubt that the boycott of Israel is unjust. So the humor here is that lovers want to boycott Palestinian products, but they can't because the Palestinians really don't produce anything. Of course, the shame of it is that they do produce terror. And they have exported terror for decades. Whether it was the Achille Lauro or the Munich Olympics, Palestinians have a product. And although I don't believe in boycotts, in this case I can say without reservation that we should all boycott terror, all forms of terror. The world would be a better place if everyone boycotted terror, ISIS terror, Palestinian terror, all terror. The second picture is published in eldersofzion.com. Elders of Zion is a website. I've mentioned it here before. It's a pro-Israel and pun website. Elders of Zion was an anti-Semitic fictional pamphlet that described how Jews controlled the world. In the website, he's a pro-Israel platform. This picture is a Palestinian woman carrying a huge box of strawberries on her shoulder. Her crop. Her fields are in the background, and they're beautiful and expansive. The caption reads, "BDS hypocrites want her out of a job." Under the picture, the caption reads, "BDSers also want you to boycott Palestinian produce because they use an Israeli exporter." And then finally, at the bottom of the bottom, it reads the following, "BDS isn't pro-Palestinian, it's simply anti-Israel." This short picture shows the ridiculous nature of BDS. The boycott is hurting Palestinians much worse than it will ever hurt Israel and Israelis. The cartoon for today is by Robert Ariel, and it was published on Monday, November 30th, 2015. It was called Mideast Punctuation. There are two frames. In the first frame, there's a member of ISIS. Next to him is a white sign that says Daesh, and that is the title of the first frame. Daesh in Arabic is the acronym for ISIS. He's holding an AK-47 in one hand, and in his other hand, there's a facsimile of the ISIS flag. It has an upside-down smile, so it's an unhappy face. He's dressed in black and sandals, and all you see are his eyes. The next frame is smoldering smoke, a plume of smoke, and below the smoke is a hole. On the ground next to the hole is the gun and the flag. The name of the frame is ! The message is clear. ISIS is being bombed. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. Guess what the #1 song on the British music charts was the other week? It's a song called Allahu Akbar. The artist performing the song goes by the name DJ Inappropriate. It repeats the words Allahu Akbar. It's just a dance track, but it constantly repeats the words Allahu Akbar. Now, that means Allah is great. According to Spotify rankings, Allahu Akbar was also number 5 on the international chart in Europe. Spotify is an excellent method by which we can judge the popularity of songs, especially singles these days. The song is very popular on radio and in clubs, and of course on Spotify. Allahu Akbar is a dance song. It's been rising slowly in popularity for the last 7 months. Since the simultaneous terror attacks in Paris, the dance track for Allahu Akbar has been on the rise and hit the charts at #1 recently. Some say that this is a good thing, that it's a healthy response to Islamic terror. Dance instead of kill. Listen to a few seconds of the soundtrack. Think about it. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. The words Allahu Akbar are part of normal parlance in Islamic prayer and Arabic interaction. In English, they are parallel to saying, thank God. But in the West, these two Arabic words are understood to be a chilling call to murder. Many of the terrorists in Paris shouted Allahu Akbar as they blew themselves up. And it was the phrase that was used as the terrorists began shooting at innocent people. We don't know the reason this title was chosen for the song. DJ Inappropriate is not coming forward to explain. From the music world to the world of the World Wide Web, Anonymous is a confederation of computer hackers. They are a notorious group, and they have successfully attacked numerous sites around the world. Anonymous attacked the New York Stock Exchange, part of the Occupy Wall Street movement. On June of 2015, they shut down the entire internet system of the government of Canada. Anonymous has hacked presidents, prime ministers, defense departments. Anonymous has hacked and shut down child porn sites. They have hacked banks, private industry like the Koch Industries. They've also orchestrated a large systematic attack against the Church of Scientology. Anonymous posted a video on YouTube recently declaring war on ISIS. The video was in French. The reader was wearing a Guy Fawkes mask and announced that Anonymous will search and will attack and will destroy ISIS. The reader pledged that Anonymous will find the ISIS websites, ISIS players and ISIS contributors, and they will destroy them. By destroying Anonymous means they will wipe them and wipe out their ability to function as ISIS on the internet. Wherever anything ISIS pops up, Anonymous will be there to shut them down. That's what they're declaring. Anonymous declared war on ISIS. Now, this is not an idle threat. It's the second time Anonymous has declared war on ISIS. The first time was after the Charlie Hebdo attack of last year. Anonymous is very capable. They have people all over the world. Most are good hackers. Some are exceptional hackers. The exceptional ones are driven. They do not stop. Some of the hackers are kids. The first person arrested in the United States for being part of Anonymous was a 19-year-old boy. His name was Dmitry Gunzer. He served 366 days in federal prison. Anonymous is very dangerous. They tend to like anarchy, but they are also fiercely protective of individual rights, especially the right to live one's own life. And that is why Anonymous has targeted ISIS. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one picante piece of information. Did you know that Allahu Akbar is a fundamental principle in Islam? Allah is the name of God, the same God as in Judaism. Jews have the same name for that God, El. It's not a different God at all. Akbar comes from the three-letter root in Arabic and in Hebrew of Kuf Beis Resh, which means all-powerful. Allahu Akbar does not actually mean God is great. That would minimize the power of God. Rather, God is the greatest or the most powerful. Allahu Akbar is referred in Islam as the takbir, which is the conjugated form of the same three-letter root as Akbar. The takbir is the Muslim public pronouncement that God is all-powerful. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.